women all over the world have faced a more severe impact of the pandemic. Globally, between 2019 and 2020, 4.2% of women's employment was destroyed as a result of the pandemic, compared to 3% of men's employment as per ILO. It led to widening of the equality divide, with more women finding themselves out of jobs and inundated with additional responsibilities of the household. What are the ways to rebuild, restore, and extend the economic contribution of women in a post pandemic world? How can there be more gender responsive policies that bring in increased security and opportunities for women? To discuss all this and more, we have Prerna Kalra, co-founder and CEO of Daalchini Technologies, Urvashi Devidayal, Sankalp India lead, Intellecap, Pearl Agarwal, founder and MD, Eximius Ventures, and Swati Bhargava, co-founder, Karo. Thank you for joining in and welcome to this ET Rise panel.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Neha. Lovely panelists.
Thank you. So we can start with a quick introduction. Swati?
I got a scholarship to study in Singapore for my A-levels and then a scholarship to the London School of Economics. So I did that, did mathematics and economics, which was not a course that a lot of women had taken at that time. And then I worked at Goldman Sachs in London for 5 years, did investment banking. For the longest time, I was part of a team of 10 people where I was the only female, the most junior. And, all my bosses were Australian and UK and, from different places. But I think that gave me good learning ground as a woman to stand my own and build my path and not be, afraid of numbers, because we all have always been lesser, but that doesn't make us lesser in any sense. And after that, once I got married to my husband, Rohan, we both actually wanted to start a business of our own. We came across the cashback idea in the UK. So we launched a business there, expanded it to India. And now, since the last 7 years, we've been here and we are India's largest cashback and coupons website. So Karo drives transactions and sales to all e-commerce sites. We have partners ranging from Amazon to Mama to Wow. And we're doing about 5,000 crores in annualized GMV and about 200 to 250 crores or so in revenue at the moment.
Hi everyone, Prerna Kalra, founder of Daalchini. I also started my journey in a small town called Meerut, which is in Uttar Pradesh, and did my engineering MBA, then regular went into fintech and 2009, right? But I was not into banks and all, doing a regular job in an MNC. And that's where in 2011, right, I got a chance to work with Paytm as among the first 3 people out there, and spent about 8 years into as heading their products and development team. Did a lot of from business development to product technology, what all not, right? And finally in 2017, I stepped out and started Daalchini. Today, we are there in about 15 cities. We have 700 plus smart stores across different manufacturing plants to hospitals to offices, co-working, co-living spaces, and including some of the people out here, right? We have our smart stores inside their offices as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Urvashi Devidayal, and I lead the Sankalp forum at Intellecap. A little bit of a tough challenge to follow amazing women entrepreneurs on this panel, but a quick introduction. Sankalp is a forum that connects impact investors and impact investors. Our focus is working on the emerging 3 billion. So we're really looking at how we can build businesses with and for the 3 billion most sort of unincluded in the world. In particular, what I wanted to sort of say in this panel, in this introduction, was our focus on gender. We really look at sort of how the role of gender and women really cuts across all of the big challenges we have in the world. So when we look at climate change, we look at agriculture, we think of agriculture and we think of farmers as male farmers, but actually 80% of the farmers are women farmers. So what we're really looking at across the work that we're doing is how do we sort of support entrepreneurs that are working in this space. And in particularly, one of the things that I've tried to do over the last 4 years that I've been working at Intellecap is to see how gender cuts across all of these sort of issues.
I'm Paul Agarwal, founder and managing director of Eximius Ventures. But before I tell you a little bit more about Eximius and our focus, I'd just like to tell you a little bit more about my journey and why women empowerment is so close to my heart. So I was born and brought up in a tier 4 town in Odisha. And I was born in an entrepreneurial family where my grandparents and parents, they ran a shop. And at a very early stage, I saw sort of, the male members of my family go to the shop, sit there and sort of run it, whereas the female members were not encouraged to do it. And I always questioned as an 8-year-old why that wasn't possible. And it was from that time onward that women empowerment, as well as wanting to do something entrepreneurial, was very close to my heart. But of course, coming from a tier 4 town in Orissa, education was the only path forward. So I studied, ended up going to the US, spent about 10 years in investment banking and then private equity across US and UK before deciding that I wanted to move back to India and actually focus on something that was my first love, which is helping entrepreneurs as well as doing something entrepreneurial for myself. So in 2020, moved back to India to set up Eximius, which is a $10 million fund where we look to invest in both male as well as female entrepreneurs with a gender neutral lens of investment at the very early stages, at the ideation stage to MVP stage, with check sizes of $300,000. There are 3 areas that we primarily focus on: fintech, health tech, and gaming. And we solely believe that the way to move forward is not to create equal outcomes for women, but to create equal opportunity for them. And that is where we sort of come from.
Thank you so much for those introductions, and looking forward to an engaging discussion ahead. Prerna, if I can first start with you. We see a lot of women home entrepreneurs, and we see great examples like that of Mrs. Bector's that started as a home-based company and now is a huge company. How can more women be inspired to follow suit?
Yeah. So I would say that a lot of women entrepreneurs or homepreneurs, right, who start, right, they are very naive at the early stage, right? While the idea could be really great, they have very less understanding of the economics of the business, right? How would they market the product, or how would they have the right team, right? The initial team, because these are some of the real ingredients of building big, right? Building a futuristic company, right? So I guess these elements are really important, while funding, etc., is also important, right? But having these skill sets, or whether in terms of counseling or whether in terms of creating an ecosystem where there could be enablers, and today, thanks to the booming startup culture in India, there are a lot of accelerators who have started approaching this as a problem, and not just funding as a problem or funding as a throwing money in the market as a solution to it, right? Building it from an holistic approach, because just because you have a great idea, that doesn't mean you're going to succeed, right? You need these initial ingredients. You need the right team. You need the right marketing initiatives, or maybe the right way to reach out to your customers, right? The scale that you need to be able to, right, take the products to a larger audience, right? That is where I think we all need to play our role and do our best, so that these homepreneurs who are starting up, they get the right platform to grow.
Right. And on a similar note, I want to ask Urvashi, there are many micro enterprises in the country that are run by women and do brisk business. However, a lot of these enterprises, like how Prerna was also mentioning, many of these have started from home and they are unable to scale up. What sets them back, and how can these be encouraged to grow further?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And Prerna, I think you brought up a lot of the points that are very critical. So access to capital, access to markets, advisory support, so which obviously the accelerators are sort of trying to sort of build through in the ecosystem here. But there are a few other things that are really critical, right? And these are the society, cultural challenges that are faced, right? Issues like mobility. right? Can they actually leave their house? When can they leave their house? Are they during business times? Challenge to devote time towards strategic sourcing. So do they have time to go out and get, or do they have access to getting the right products or the right sort of raw materials at competitive rates, etc. They don't actually have the time to go out and find that. So these are all sort of challenges in building a business. But a really big challenge, I think, sort of going back to the access to capital side of it, is also the financial institutions, where they have difficulty finding these women, right? So even if the pool of capital is available, in terms of micro entrepreneurs and home entrepreneurs, how they're actually able to reach the customers. And that's a big challenge. So it's a challenge from the demand side and from the supply side. And some of these linkages really need to be sort of worked on. The ecosystem really needs to work on to build these bridges between these people. So some of these challenges, I think there are a lot of initiatives being worked from the government side, from the private sector side, but it's going to take a little bit of time to sort of build through to actually support home entrepreneurs.
Right, and access to capital, as you mentioned, remains a challenge, as well as growth opportunities. Which brings me a question for Pearl, that when we talk about growth opportunities for women entrepreneurs, what can women create for other women-led businesses in India to bridge the equality divide?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? Because at the end of the day, what we have seen, at least in the last couple of years, is that there has been quite a bit of focus on wanting to provide capital to women. However, to Urvashi's point, how does that connect happen is something, in my view, that is still missing, where demand is being created, but supply needs to also catch up to demand. And I think this is where women-led businesses can actually help facilitate the creation of supply. Because today, if we sort of take from a VC's perspective, which is where I spend a lot of my time, that we often look for founders that have spent time executing, that have spent time as the layer B team, and have worked with other entrepreneurs. And that sort of gives us comfort that this entrepreneur is ready to be able to build something of their own. Having said that, there are first-time entrepreneurs that are doing it, but at the same time, when there is a little bit of experience that they come with, it just gives us comfort to provide capital. Now, that doesn't happen often because we don't see a lot of women in senior leadership position. And this is where I believe that women-led businesses can really make an impact, where they can promote more women. And I'm not saying create, again, coming back to my point, create equal opportunity and not outcome. So not really make it less meritocratic, but rather provide opportunity for women to come into that platform, to be able to sort of, voice their opinion and grow within that, so that they can get the right experience, right platform, and be able to build something outside of that as well. And I believe that because we can connect with other women, and we can also get them to speak about some of the personal challenges that might be preventing them from getting to that leadership position. As women-led businesses, we have an advantage of making this happen, as opposed to men-led businesses.
Right, and that's of course on a very optimistic note, and I hope more women entrepreneurs can think like that and make it happen. But Swati, if I can now come to you, we are talking about growth opportunities and about there being a lot of challenges in the ecosystem as far as women-led businesses are concerned. So they still form, we're talking about all this, but women entrepreneurs still form a very small percentage of the Indian startup ecosystem. How can we hope to change this dynamic?
Well, I guess first we have to think about why is it that there are so few women entrepreneurs, and I think for me, it's always the question of funnel. It's like how we do in our business. We want to analyze the full funnel, right? And I think it really starts from when you go down and see that there are less women getting education. There are less women going to college, less women who are working, and then less women therefore saying, okay, let me actually do something of my own. Because getting a job is, yes, it is easier than starting your own business, because it doesn't come with you thinking about everything from office to marketing to funding to team to like 20 other things with it. So it is a magnified challenge in that sense. So I think we also have to go back and look at the forces that are in play while this funnel is being formed. So when we look at education itself, I mean, growing up in Ambala, I know that there was sometimes I heard a lot of narrative about education is important. Why? Taki MBA kar lo acha taki husband acha mil jaye. But then, that is, if you bring up your daughters, telling them that their reason of getting education or purpose should be to eventually find that really either a really good business family that you never have to work again in your life again, or a very good husband who has done an MBA himself. So then then the aspiration in that woman will be kahan se aayega to become an entrepreneur, because my objective was to achieve these two things, which I managed to somehow. So I think we have to change the conditioning with which we bring up our daughters, with which we look at our nieces at home, and the encouragement we give. So if there is a smart girl in your family who says, okay, I want to go, grow up and do this, or if I am living in a small town like Karnal or Panipat and I say मैं मुंबई जाऊंगी पढ़ने के लिए, और सारे मामा चाचा सब लोग बोले अरे क्या करेगी जाके, कोई नहीं जाता हमारी फैमिली में से, तो यही रहे. So if that is how you're going to bring up your daughters, then forget about trying to improve any numbers. Let's not talk about how many women are going to take that seat on the board table, because they will not get there. Only to take a seat at the board table means you must have at least 10 plus or 15 plus years of work experience itself. But many women fall off after a couple of years. They fall off after they get married itself. So one is about the aspiration that we instill in our girls when they are young. Why should they work? What should they do? And the second is also about our expectation from them. Is it just for them to, raise kids and be mothers and daughters, or is there more that you should expect? Which I think you should, because they are capable of it, right? So we have to think about all these things as well. And then the third thing is, what is the support that the woman gets when she actually gets married? Is the husband supportive? Are the in-laws supportive? So because as a woman entrepreneur, when you're running your business, you will need support from all of them. If you have kids, you might want to leave them at home. If you don't have, then you might not want to answer that question every day on why you don't have. So there'll be different sorts of things that you need from your family to be supportive, and I feel that I am really blessed in that sense. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 9-10 years now, and my family and in-laws have supported so much. My husband has supported so much. So at no point I've had trouble, but I see others who've fallen off during that time because they did not get that support. So I think that so social fabric around us is really important to improve any of these numbers. And then of course, will more women be entrepreneurs? I think we have to encourage them more with more funding overall in the ecosystem, more upskilling opportunities, more support from all quarters.
No, of course, changing the conditioning, but also, as you mentioned, an enabling ecosystem which can encourage more women entrepreneurs, and funding is a major part of that, which brings me to a question for Prerna, that in what way does funding for women-led businesses remain a challenge in India?
If you look at the number of unicorns today, right, and how many of them, less than 13% of them, which became unicorn last year, right, had a woman founder, right? So a lot of VCs see with that lens today also, right? Because that the VCs are also binded by what they see today, right? Hence, this will get evolved over a period of time. Today we are talking about it, at least, right? If you look at 5 years back, we were not even talking about it, right? Like Swati mentioned, it has to start someday. It has started already. That's the good part of it, right? Today, family support. Like I have a daughter today, and I don't go to that guilt today that I'm leaving her at home with my in-laws, right? I'm coming over here for work, right? I'm doing something wrong, right? But that's not with everyone, right? So it is more about us, right? We have to get past that guilt that, what will happen to my family? It will get sorted, right? So if you take that one step ahead and show it to the world, right? That we are here to prove, we are here to do something bigger, right? There will be initial gaps, there will be initial hiccups, right? But eventually things will start falling in place, right? Your family, your support system, whether it is friends or acquaintances, right? They will start to understand that what is there, what do you look forward to, right? So one is basically, this is not a short-term problem and there is no one solution to it, right? Funding gap, because this is a chicken and egg. Until more unicorns with women-led founders come in, right? VCs or PE funds, etc., would not have that kind of a confidence in women-led businesses. So it will evolve over a period of time. Having said that, it is us as women who will have to take that initiative, whether the ones who graduate to that level and start doing angel investments and like maybe focus on women-led angel investments, right? Maybe that's a step one, right? But eventually, as women entrepreneurs, we will have to get out and start looking at it from a perspective that, okay, it is not just the family, right? We have to build something for the world, and that is what we are all here for. It is not just the men's responsibility to do that, right? We have equal responsibility for doing that as well.
Right. Definitely. But I also want to speak a bit about policy measures. And Urvashi, if I can just bring you in, there were a lot of policy measures that were implemented during the pandemic, but not many of them have been gender responsive. So how significant are such policies when we speak of building a more inclusive and secure ecosystem for women, especially one that can withstand shocks such as COVID-19?
Yeah, sure. And I'm going to bring in a perspective that's slightly different from the women entrepreneurs on this panel, right? I'm assuming you're the shock. I'm talking more from a micro entrepreneur perspective. So from, a survey was conducted by Seva Bharat that said that 78% of women entrepreneurs were out of savings during the lockdown, right? I mean, these are really cash-based businesses, small businesses that rely on that cash flow to keep their business alive. Now, obviously, there were a lot of schemes, a lot of policies that were sort of announced, but did they reach these women? Not really, right? And I mean, these are really simple things like, is information getting to them? And this is schemes and policies across the board, right? I mean, do they have access to their phones? I mean, especially during the lockdown, all the women were sort of giving their phones to their children. I mean, anyway, there's a really big digital gender divide in the country, but even the women who had access to phones were giving their phones and their devices to their children. So it's not like we could reach them in any way. The reason why these policies and schemes really need to be very gender specific is because there are ways to reach women at the last mile, women rural entrepreneurs, women micro entrepreneurs, and that's really leveraging the power of civil society in our country. So when we look at NGOs, when we look at women collectives, self-help groups, social entrepreneurs, the networks and they have are absolutely phenomenal, right? I mean, and we saw this when it came to actually basic relief work. Civil society was able to reach sort of the last mile where, market wasn't reaching or government actually wasn't reaching. So I think, there has to be, I mean, and these black swan events, these big shocks are going to continue to happen, right? Climate change is going to disrupt our world. Financial markets is going to disrupt our world. So recognizing that these women are not being reached is something that that gender lens has to be taken, because this is going to continue to happen. And there are ways to reach them. But if we don't take a viewpoint that that there is a lack of access of information to these women, then that's going to be a bit of a challenge going forward, right? These women will just keep facing these economic shocks that happen as we go along. So I'm a very strong believer that we actually have to make these specific and say that they have to be sort of, that there has to be a gender lens, especially at a micro entrepreneur lens.
Well, if I can now come to you, globally, there are enough examples where venture funds set up by women are investing in women entrepreneurs. What can be done in India to encourage such investments?
I think, in fact, in the last couple of years, we have seen a few funds that have come up that are focusing solely on women entrepreneurs. But I would say that, to Prerna's point, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation again, because venture fund is primarily investing limited partners' capital. And what limited partners are looking for is return. So unless we don't have enough women entrepreneurs that are coming up, enough women entrepreneurs that are creating large outcomes, to be able to create a self-sustainable investment vehicle that's focusing solely on women becomes slightly challenging. Because at the end of the day, somebody who's giving capital wants to ensure that they're generating their 10 or 12% return that they would be generating anywhere else. And whatever investment mechanisms that you are using as a venture capital, you're able to give them the same. Which means that we also need to ensure that to be able to raise capital solely for women from limited partners and not just do it once, but do it on a continuous basis, we have enough demand, which means there are enough women entrepreneurs that are coming up and that are sort of getting trained and creating large outcomes. So while I think that in the last few years, we have made quite a bit of progress and we've grown leaps and bounds in this direction, it is going to be a little bit of a slow phenomena where slowly as we see more and more women entrepreneurs come up, and there are fantastic ones that have come up, we have a couple of them here as well, but outside of this as well, there are quite a few women entrepreneurs that have made their mark. This will make it easier for VCs to go out there and be able to raise capital for women entrepreneurs. And once we have a few of them that are able to actually return capital, so let's say if I take an example of Female Founders Fund in the US, which has done a phenomenal job, they were only able to raise 6 million in the first fund. But because they were able to return that fund very easily through this thesis, they were able to raise multiple funds after that. And I think a few of these trial and errors would be required in India as well before we can create an investment vehicle. Now, until then, what do? We have to sort of start somewhere. And I think there are two mechanisms that can work. One is something that funds are already trying, where they're taking out a smaller pool of capital out of the entire allocation to be able to create platforms for women to not just get funding, but also get all the other aspects, the right team, the right network, and all the other ingredients that are required to be able to create those outcomes. And the other aspect could definitely be angel investments, where folks who are focused on this particular agenda can come up and can invest in their personal capacity. And I think a little bit of both of these are required in the short term until we can start to raise large funds for women. But at the same time, I think that it's only today the market might not be deep enough, but it's only a matter of another couple of years or 5 years at the max before we start to see more and more women VCs or even male VCs that come up and want to invest solely in women entrepreneurs. In fact, I would say that, we also do give precedence to women while we haven't stopped investing in male entrepreneurs. But at the same time, what we are seeing is that on average, only 20% of our deal flow is from women entrepreneurs. So we also have to sort of, see a little bit more supply to be able to start focusing. Until then, we continue to sort of take a very gender neutral approach and ensure that at least the biasness in our mind doesn't stop us from investing in an entrepreneur who's female and good.
Okay, that certainly sounds encouraging. And more power to that. Now, if I can just switch gears a bit and come to Swati. Swati, I want to talk a bit about skill development and training programs which are available for women entrepreneurs. Do you think they give enough importance to it and it is sufficient to meet the demands of the current environment?
If truth be told, I think that currently men and women both don't give enough importance to upskilling and training development. So I wouldn't hold women only for it. Because there are enough men that you see in doing the same thing for 4 or 5 years, right? And then you ask them, okay, you've always been doing, let's say, SEO, but do you know paid marketing? Nahi, wo to kabhi nahi kiya. I mean, could have easily done a GA course, but didn't do, or do you know data analytics? Nahi, we didn't do it. So I mean, even they need to do it, and I think people should do it for continuous professional growth, because the more that you take up courses, the more that you take advantages of L&D opportunities around you, the more your own value goes up. And when you look at your resume, when you look at you talk to an employer, you are able to say that, okay, I know these things which I've done professionally, and out of my own interest, I've gone and actually taught myself all this. It shows your drive to succeed. It shows that you are making an effort to upskill yourself, and that itself says a lot about you. I would any days prefer a candidate who says that I have invested in myself, in teaching myself these things, versus someone who says, no, I have not really gone and done anything, for myself anyway. So I think both men and women need to do it. COVID made it a little, brought it home a little bit more, because the people, unfortunately, some people lost jobs. And then if there was no more job in that particular field, they had to very quickly change and upskill to get jobs elsewhere. And for women, perhaps it becomes a little harder, because sometimes you have a lot of obligations at home and you feel that, okay, if I have a little bit of extra time, why don't I do this particular thing which I've been putting off for so long? It could be, maybe redoing your, a certain part of your house, or it could be, actually getting more involved with your kids on their summer project. Or so you have a choice often between investing that time on yourself or with a certain member of your family, and you always tend to pick the other person. So in that sense, it is. But, I think one could argue that even some male people, have those obligations as well. So I think if women want to succeed in their career, and if you have that desire in you to be ambitious and have a good career, then you don't have an option but to take training seriously, take skill development seriously. And a very easy thing to do is to actually focus and pay more attention when you actually attend classes. Like, I'll give you an example. At Kashkar also, we do so much L&D, right? But let's say when we have different classes going on, not everyone is paying attention. So वो आ रहे हैं, पूरा time लगा रहे हैं उसके अंदर, but still not really caring so much कि कौन करेगा. So if you drop that attitude itself, then you can get more bang for buck in the time investment you're already doing. You're anyways going to work. You're anyways going to sit through certain classes because your boss has nominated you for those classes. You may as well really have a desire to learn. So I think when it comes to upskilling and all, I think there is no dearth of opportunities. There is no dearth of courses. Today, YouTube is full of everything. It really comes down to desire and how badly you want it. Sorry, and whether you're a man or woman, until you really want something, you won't get it anyway. So, we have to want it for ourselves.
Right. And I think pandemic must have just, created that need as well to upskill. And Prerna, if I can ask you the pandemic, it had an especially harsh impact on women with widening of the equality divide and many of them being out of jobs. How can we move towards repair and restoration efforts to uplift more women in a post-pandemic time?
Yeah. So I would say that glad to the digitalization which is happening, right? There are so many platforms, opportunities, right, which have come up, which are helping, like Urvashi mentioned, right? There are so many funds being created, right? There are so many schemes being launched, right? Out through which somebody who wants to start their own business, they can get help, right? Somebody who wants to just be part of some kind of a platform, do make extra money, right? Do a part-time work, etc. All of these things are now possible. I guess the place where we still lack is that, are these reaching to the right consumers? Are these reaching to the right people who need it, right? That is one. Identifying, right, who are the ones who can really get benefited out of it, right? Who can really take that up, right? Take that up as an opportunity and really skill them and then make that as an outcome or as a business for themselves, right? So that is where I guess there's a lot of work to be done, because the schemes or startups which have come up, they have come up, but that is not really reaching to a very large audience. Still, we get to hear that it's only some percentage of their businesses are really coming from these small micro entrepreneurs. Rather, there are large companies who are getting attached to them as a wholesalers or something, right? And they are making money out of it, right? On a face of it, they're saying that they have created an opportunity, but really the ones who really need it, right, are not getting it, right? So that is one, right, for which whether it is learning, whether it is information being thrown out, information being given out to people, right, about these opportunities is required, right? Or whether it is, right, companies or startups coming up with something with which this information can be imparted to these women, right? Is required, right? In fact, at Daalchini also, today we have about 30% of our partners who are women entrepreneurs, right? While we think that the business we are in, right, is the most appropriate business for women, but still I would say 70% of them are still men, right, who are taking a plunge and like exercising the platform and making use of it, right? And still only the 20-30%, right? Our idea should be that 70% should have been women, because it's the platform where women can make most of it, right? While sitting at home, they can make money, right? So that is where I guess the what you asked, right? Repair and restoration work has to be done, right? Platforms are there, opportunities are there, but reaching out to the right woman entrepreneur or the potential woman entrepreneur is what is needed.
Right, right, definitely. Also, Urvashi, taking off from what Prerna is saying, when we speak about opportunities and about women's participation, it remains low, specifically also in managerial and leadership positions. As per an ILO report, globally in 2020, only 28.3% of managers and leaders are women. And this figure has changed very little over the past 27 years. So, what is needed to promote more women in leadership?
Thanks for that question. And I think this is perhaps one of my favorite questions and my biggest challenges that I face. I also work with a largely male leadership, and I will say that they are all fully on board to sort of see how we can make a change. But I mean, we're really sort of tackling patriarchy, right? And I mean, this is something that is a generational change that we have to make. Swati, to your point, I also, and I tell this to my male colleagues all the time. I said, when you all were like kicking footballs around and like being all male on when we were younger, I was going to stitching classes and cooking classes. I mean, that was my ICSE course. I mean, and I sit in Bombay, I mean, I grew up in the most metropolitan sort of empowered city that is possible. But I did that, I was also sort of told to have, that my end goal was to get married and have children. So, I mean, this is really going to be a generational shift, but also sort of taking that into sort of account. I think the one sort of real revelation in this whole COVID pandemic has been the number of men who've had to do housework. Right. And I think every male sort of colleague or, sort of family member I have has sort of washed dishes and done housework. And that really sort of comes down to the idea of care work, right? Care work is still sort of focused on women, right? Whether it is childcare or then elderly care, which is also a very big part of our work that we take on at home. So I think there needs to be a shift, right? There needs to be a shift about how men also sort of start taking on a lot more responsibility at home. And institutions need to sort of address that, right? So I think, Pearl, you mentioned this a lot about being gender neutral, right? So our policies need to be focused on being gender neutral. So if we're giving, it needs to be parental leave, not maternity leave. I mean, obviously it's maternity leave, but it needs to be parental leave. And there needs to be sort of systems in place that allow for this, right? So, I mean, if there's elderly care that has to happen, it shouldn't be that the woman has to quit her job to stay at home, right? Or, we have to think through what institutions need to do a little bit better for that. And then I think, the sort of the second point that I really wanted to make on this topic was the real importance of peer networks. It gets a bit challenging, but there are very, very strong male peer networks that happen within business, right? Which don't happen as much for women, mainly because, A, there are fewer women, and B, they're doing so many other things, right? Like how much more can you take on? And I understand that, but, eventually at the end of the day, business is also done through a very strong personal connection. And there are also sort of challenges that women face in leadership positions, or actually, let me make this clear. There are challenges being in a leadership position that men and women face, right? But you need a really strong peer network to actually support you. I mean, I know there's a lot of focus on mentorship, and I think mentorship has a role to play. But there is also a very strong role for how peer networks can support you in this space. So when you hit that leadership position, you have to make decisions which you have never had to face when you are coming up the ladder, right? Like running the programmatic side of work is not the same as being a leader. And I think making decisions like that really requires a very trusted sort of support system to make that. And that can't be a trusted support system from home. It has to be a trusted professional support system, right? So, I mean, what women entrepreneurs face, what women VCs face, I mean, it would be sort of, what women in the development sector face. I mean, it's really important to have that support system to take you to the next level. and I mean, I'll say it outright that men and women in leadership positions face similar situations. But yeah, so those were the 2 points. Care work, more men doing dishes and taking care of children and taking care of elderly, and sort of more peer networks.
Right, right. No, that's very interesting to know about support system and peer networks for women in this space as well, which is of course needed. Yes, definitely. It's like men have a much stronger peer network, as you said. Uh, Pearl, on a similar note, what would your advice be to young women entrepreneurs who want to scale up?
Yeah, I would echo some of the thoughts that Urvashi laid out, right? One of the most important things for women, women are smart, they are educated, they are talented, and that's probably why they have made it to where they are. But I think one of the biggest things that I had personally lacked, and I also see some of my counterparts struggling with, is network, to Urvashi's point. Because somehow, the folks that we grew up with or the folks that we surrounded ourselves with during our careers have fallen out of the workforce. Hence, our a peer network or a network is not as strong as some of our male counterparts that have grown up with some of the folks that are in leadership positions today. And for them to be able to open up those networks is way easier. So one of my advice to everybody that we speak with, we interact with, is that network very consciously, because we don't have that unconscious network that has carried forward with us. So you have to take out time from your day-to-day operations and whatever we are doing to be able to dedicate 10 hours, 5 hours a week to just network. Because to be able to hire, to be able to raise funds, to be able to sort of get clients, for all of these we require strong network, and which is what is not readily available to us. So my only advice would be do it very consciously and constantly measure the return of the time that you're spending in that direction.
Right. Right. And Swati, what was your learning during the pandemic as a woman entrepreneur, and how did it impact your business? And how can other women-led companies be better prepared for such unforeseen situations?
Well, during the pandemic, because our business is related to Indian e-commerce, so fortunately, the business actually did well because e-commerce was doing well. Everybody wanted everything at home. So in that sense, we were lucky that we were in the positive quadrant. It could have just been anything else, and we could have been in travel, and for some time it would have been tougher in that sense. So I think that was good. Otherwise, I think my learnings as a woman entrepreneur were similar to perhaps other entrepreneurs in that space, where we all realized that we all had to act quickly and find other ways of growth sometimes. Because in April 2020, I remember when the pandemic started, the first couple of months Indian e-commerce was not geared to manage. So supply was shut down, there were containment zones everywhere, Amazon wasn't delivering right for some time. And so when e-commerce stalls, our business also completely stalled. So in the month of April, we actually went into education, and we started tying up with Coursera and Byju's and Udemy and all the other, education sort of categories, so that people could shop at these sites via Karo, get extra cash back, and it opens up a category that wasn't reliant on e-commerce. So we had to be nimble in that sense. So I think being nimble was like number one learning. Number two was that, we always had to, it is good to always keep track of where are your costs and expenses. So because suddenly when you realize that for 2 months, your earnings are going to be, 60-70% down, and in many cases people had 90-100% down, but then the instinctive reaction for some businesses was to start laying off people, and we didn't lay off a single person. We did not do any salary cuts, and that's something I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, because I think that there should be no other way of doing it. This should not be such an achievement that, oh, we didn't lay off. But the point is that maybe that was a learning, that it's good that so far we were always focused on some kind of unit economics and metrics, that we had the cash to ride through that. So I think it's important to always have a pot of cash that you can rely on, and therefore very close third learning was that fundraise when you can. And have that war chest, because sometimes things happen which are out of your control, and then you want to be able to ride through that, because it's not just me. For example, if we have a team of 250 people, average 4 people in everyone's family, we have a minimum 1,000, if not probably 4 or 5,000 people who are affected just by our actions of keeping, hiring, firing, all of that, right? So I think as entrepreneurs, we also have a responsibility that we must be careful about and conscious of, and therefore not have this culture of aggressive hiring, firing, where without thinking suddenly you hire and then tomorrow COVID aa gaya, so again you fire. You can't do that sort of stuff, So I think that was important. And then as an entrepreneur, I also learned that, we had to be creative about culture building ways, because we all were not in the office. I remember when we left office, I was like, see you guys in 2 weeks. And then, it's like 2 years and now we've come back on. In between, we did a few spurts here and there. But then we started the CK Morning Show every day at 9:30 a.m. I started posting about it on my Instagram. In fact, I grew my Instagram and my social media during this period because I thought that is one way to invest in personal growth while not going out in some sense, So I think we just had, everyone has to be more creative, and also it showed us the importance of having a good culture itself, the work culture. So that really brought us all together, meeting every morning, video calling, playing games, talking about it. So lots of learnings, and I hope we all don't have to go through it again.
Yeah, I think we all hope that, and hope none of this continues. I just have a final common question for you all, and it could be something which you have wanted for women entrepreneurs. So I'll start with Prerna on that.
Okay. So I would say that like in our country, there are about 48 lakh educated unemployed women. Like a country which has such a large resource, right? And still aiming to be just become 3x of their current GDP is actually you're aiming very less, right? That's what I think, right? You have such a large, if there are ways, right, we all take a pledge, right, that we will work towards reducing this number, right? 48 lakh educated unemployed women, right? So in some way, if we can contribute in uplifting them so that they become a active part of the GDP, that is what we all should aim for, right? And that's my pledge, right? When I started Daalchini, I was like, at least I should be able to convert 1,000 such women to women entrepreneurs, right? And we have been today till date living with that as a pledge and every day working towards it. And that is what I would like each one of us, right, to try, right? Because that does not only impact them individually, but it definitely impacts our country's GDP in a very large way.
Urvashi.
So lots of wishes for women entrepreneurs, but perhaps the one critical thing I think is women and their agency around money. So if you are going to Pearl to ask for money, whatever number you have in mind, double it, triple it, 10x it before you ask for money, because there's a very, very big likelihood that you will ask for much less than you are worth or what you can actually achieve. So that's my one wish and hope for women, that they raise money like men do.
Pearl.
I think great wishes from both Prerna and Urvashi. I would say it would be great if we can make it more normal for women to talk about their personal lives and the challenges that they face personally while building a business as well. I feel that a lot of women drop out because they think that they cannot get it all or they cannot achieve it all, but you can, because women have done it. And everybody who's giving 10 hours, 12 hours to their professional life is also figuring out ways to manage their personal life. And sometimes they're probably not giving 10 to 12 hours, but rather figuring out more efficient ways. So for people to come out and become role model for younger women, to come up and understand how they're managing is something that would be my wish. This would encourage a lot of younger women who are in college and wanting to pursue this to know that it's possible and they can have it all.
Swati.
My first wish for women would be that we should not be as shy. Women should not, I wish women would not hesitate to put themselves out there. They always stand at the back of the line, wait for others to finish, then politely speak up. Nothing wrong in that. but I think we need to be a little more aggressive, and that's absolutely okay. And we don't have to apologize for that. And my second wish for women would be to really, on a related note, not hesitate to take your seat at the table. I say this to, some of our female colleagues at Karo as well. When we go into a board meeting, it's a big room, right? And everybody will come and quickly take the seats, and the women will go and sit piche, piche, piche. And I said, why are you trying to be invisible? No, you should be like, I want to sit here next to you. Why do I want to sit there at the back? So please don't try to be invisible. You're meant to be very, very visible. And that is what my wish is. And the third very related wish again is that I wish more women would take credit for their work and not always pass it on or thank luck, which is true. We all need luck. But, we all apologize a lot more, and, we tend to take less credit. So take your seat at the table, take your credit, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Right, I think those are some very great wishes that are coming forward, and I hope all of them become a reality sometime or the other. But thank you so much for joining us and for the key insights that you all have given. Women have faced a particularly severe impact of COVID-19, but I'm sure step by step and bit by bit, repair and restoration will come by so that they can be back on track. Thanks once again, and it was great to have you with us.